The Deltans unleashed ravenous vortex to tear apart human bodies and crunch bones. But these apex predators would soon be obeying human commands and hunting Deltans instead. Humans of Earth, I am Xanth, High Commander of the Deltan Empire. We have released swarms of vortex, monstrous creatures bred to devour your kind, onto your world. Earth will run red with human blood. Your species ends now, the reptilian alien snarled, yellow eyes flashing. The transmission cut out. Roger Howard inspected a deer carcass, seeing claw marks from no earthly creature. A human scream ripped through the forest. He sprinted toward it, unaware he would encounter a vortex himself. Thousands of jet-black monsters, all muscle, teeth and hunger, materialized in city centers worldwide. Slaughter commenced as 8-foot-tall predators shredded through human flesh with razor-sharp claws and chomped through skulls with jagged teeth. A vortex burst from foliage, tackling Roger. He grabbed its jaws, barely holding them back, rank breath singeing his face. Drool sizzled on his cheek. He jabbed a thumb in its feral eye. It recoiled, howling. He lunged, putting it in a chokehold, biceps bulging as it thrashed. To his shock, it went limp, submitting to the dominant creature. He realized its behavior was like any Earth apex predator. Wheels turned in his head. Survivors huddled in the Rocky Mountains, watching vortex stalk between trees, eager for the taste of humans. Roger strode into camp, the alien creature obediently trailing him. Amazed stares followed him. He had a plan to turn the predators against their masters. With time short and death closing in, Roger had to teach the survivors how to tame vortex. If he failed, humanity died. He met their eyes grimly and whistled to his vortex. The creature padded to his side and sat on its haunches awaiting orders. It was time to begin. As Roger whistled commands to his vortex, blood-curdling screams pierced through the forest. He froze, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. The shrieks were human, and they were close. Roger sprinted towards the commotion, heart pounding in his chest. He burst into a clearing and stumbled back in horror. A group of hikers lay strewn about, their bodies torn asunder. A jet-black vortex crouched over one of the corpses, its muzzle dripping with blood and viscera. The creature's head snapped up as it noticed Roger. It let out a guttural snarl, baring its razor-sharp teeth. Roger's breath caught in his throat. He was unarmed and alone. He knew he stood no chance against the vortex in a direct confrontation. The creature stalked towards him, its muscles rippling beneath its thick hide. Roger's mind raced as he tried to recall everything he knew about apex predators. He had to find a way to distract the vortex, to draw its attention away from him. Roger grabbed a nearby rock and hurled it at the creature's head. The vortex flinched as the stone struck its snout, letting out an angry yelp. Roger picked up another rock, then another, throwing them in rapid succession while shouting at the top of his lungs. The vortex hesitated, seemingly confused by Roger's actions. It cocked its head to the side, studying him with its feral eyes. Roger's heart hammered in his chest as he slowly backed away, maintaining eye contact with the creature. To his surprise, the vortex didn't pursue him. It snorted and turned back to the hiker's remains, apparently deciding that the easy meal was more appealing than the strange, noisy human. Roger didn't wait around to see if the creature would change its mind. He turned and ran, his legs pumping furiously as he tore through the underbrush. He didn't stop until he reached his cabin, slamming the door shut behind him and collapsing against it, gasping for breath. As he sat there trying to process what had just happened, a thought began to form in his mind. The vortex had hesitated. It had seemed unsure, almost as if it was thinking, assessing the situation. That wasn't the behavior of a mindless killing machine. Roger pushed himself to his feet and began gathering supplies, weapons, ammunition, food, water. He had a theory to test, and he knew it would mean venturing back out into the woods, back to the vortex that stalked the earth. But if he was right, if the creature's predatory instincts and natural intelligence could be exploited, then maybe, just maybe, humanity stood a chance against the Deltan invasion. Roger checked his rifle and steeled his nerves. It was time to hunt the hunters. Roger's boots crunched softly on the forest floor, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for any sign of the vortex. He had been tracking the creature for hours, following the faint trail of broken branches and disturbed leaves it left in its wake. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. As he pushed deeper into the woods, Roger stumbled upon a strange sight, a dilapidated military bunker, half hidden beneath a thick layer of vines and moss. He approached cautiously, his hand resting on the handle of his knife. The bunker's door hung slightly ajar, as if inviting him to enter. Inside, Roger found a trove of information about the vortex. Scattered across dusty tables and pinned to the walls were detailed diagrams of the creature's anatomy, notes on their behavioral patterns, and lists of potential weaknesses. Roger pored over the documents, his heart racing as he absorbed the knowledge. He learned that the vortex had an incredibly keen sense of smell, capable of detecting human pheromones from miles away. He also discovered that the creatures lived in hierarchical packs, with dominant males leading the way. Roger's mind raced as he considered the implications of this information. Armed with this new understanding, Roger set about devising a plan to capture a young vortex. He gathered supplies from the bunker, chemicals, tranquilizer darts, reinforced cables, and set out into the forest once more. Roger selected a small clearing as the site for his trap. He carefully arranged the chemicals he had found, creating a potent mixture that mimicked the scent of a wounded animal. Then he settled in to wait, crouched silently in the underbrush with his tranquilizer gun at the ready. Hours passed, the forest growing quiet as night fell. Roger's muscles ached from remaining motionless, but he didn't dare move. Then he heard it, the soft rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig. A lone vortex emerged from the shadows, its nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of Roger's bait. The creature moved cautiously, its eyes darting back and forth as it approached the clearing. Roger held his breath, his finger poised on the trigger. The vortex took one step, then another, drawing closer to the trap. In a flash of movement, Roger fired the tranquilizer gun. The dart struck the vortex in the neck, and the creature let out a surprised yelp. It staggered, its legs giving out beneath it as the sedative took hold. Roger leapt from his hiding spot, moving quickly to restrain the vortex with the reinforced cables. As he worked, Roger couldn't help but marvel at the creature's beauty. Up close he could see the ripple of powerful muscles beneath its jet-black hide, the glint of intelligence in its eyes. This was no mindless beast, but a highly evolved predator, perfectly adapted to its environment. With the vortex securely bound, Roger set about studying it more closely. He took samples of its blood and saliva, making detailed notes on its physical characteristics. As he worked, he found himself talking softly to the creature, his voice low and soothing. Days turned into weeks as Roger worked to train the vortex. He started small, using food rewards to encourage the creature to respond to basic commands. Gradually, he introduced more complex tasks, always careful to establish himself as the dominant figure in their relationship. To his surprise, the vortex proved to be a quick learner. It seemed to understand the power dynamics at play, submitting to Roger's authority even as it grew stronger and more confident. Roger named the creature Shadow, a nod to its stealthy nature and dark coloring. As news of Roger's success spread, other survivors began to seek him out. They came from far and wide, drawn by the promise of a weapon that could turn the tide against the Deltans. Under Roger's guidance, they learned to capture and train their own vortex, forming a makeshift army of handlers and their alien companions. Together, they launched a series of daring raids against the Deltan invaders, using the vortex's keen senses and predatory instincts to track down and eliminate enemy units. The Deltans, caught off guard by this unexpected resistance, began to falter, their advance slowing as they struggled to adapt to this new threat. But even as the human resistance grew stronger, Roger couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. He had seen the Deltans' technology firsthand, had witnessed the ruthless efficiency of their conquest. Why, then, had they chosen to rely on the vortex as their primary weapon. The more Roger thought about it, the more he became convinced that the Deltans had a hidden agenda, some deeper purpose that went beyond mere conquest. He shared his suspicions with his fellow survivors, but they were too caught up in their newfound success to pay him much heed. Roger knew he would have to investigate further on his own to uncover the truth behind the Deltan invasion and the role of the vortex in their plans. As he set out into the wilderness once more, Shadow by his side, Roger couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over him. He knew he was walking into danger, but he also knew that he had no choice. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and he would stop at nothing to ensure its survival. Roger's heart pounded as he listened to Xanth's chilling message, the Deltan High Commander's words echoing in his mind. The Vortex, once thought to be mindless killing machines, were evolving at a terrifying pace. With each passing day, they grew more intelligent, more cunning, more deadly. Roger knew he had to act fast before the creatures turned on their human handlers and all was lost. He gathered his team of Vortex handlers, his face grim as he shared the news. They had to end this war, and quickly. But how? Roger's mind raced, until finally a plan began to take shape. "I'm going to infiltrate the Deltan command ship," he said, his voice low and determined. "I'll confront Xanth directly, try to negotiate a truce. It's our only chance." His team exchanged uneasy glances, but they knew better than to argue. Roger was their leader, and they trusted him with their lives. Roger turned to Shadow, the vortex he had trained and bonded with over the long months of war. "I need you to create a distraction," he said, kneeling down to look the creature in the eye. "Draw their fire, give me a chance to slip aboard undetected." Shadow let out a low growl, as if to say it understood. Roger felt a surge of pride, marveling at the bond he had formed with this once fearsome predator. With Shadow by his side, Roger made his way to the Deltan command ship, his heart racing as he drew closer. He had stolen a Deltan uniform from a fallen soldier, the fabric feeling strange and alien against his skin. As Shadow launched into a ferocious attack on the ship's defenses, Roger slipped aboard, his breath catching in his throat as he entered the belly of the beast. The corridors were dark and labyrinthine, the air thick with the stench of death and decay. Roger moved silently through the ship, his senses on high alert, ready for anything. And then he heard it, the sound of voices coming from just ahead. He crept closer, straining to make out the words. It was Xanth, deep in conversation with another Deltan officer. Roger's blood ran cold as he listened, the truth behind the invasion finally becoming clear. The Deltans weren't just here to eradicate humanity, they were running from something far worse. The Zerg, a race of parasitic aliens that had already consumed several Deltan colonies. Earth was to be a buffer zone, a sacrificial lamb to buy the Deltans time to regroup and strengthen their defenses. Roger felt a surge of anger, of disgust. How could they do this? How could they condemn an entire planet, an entire species, to save their own skins? He knew what he had to do. Roger burst into Xanth's quarters, his weapon drawn, his eyes blazing with fury. The Deltan High Commander looked up in surprise, then in anger. "You!" he hissed, reaching for his own weapon. "I should have known you'd come." Roger didn't hesitate. He launched himself at Xanth, the two of them grappling furiously, trading blows and kicks. Roger fought with the skill and strength of a seasoned soldier, using every trick he had learned in his years of training. But Xanth was a formidable opponent, his body hardened by a lifetime of warfare. They were evenly matched, locked in a deadly dance, neither willing to yield. Roger's muscles burned with exertion, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He knew he had to end this, and soon. And then, just as he was about to deliver the final blow, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Roger froze, his blood turning to ice in his veins. He knew what that sound meant. The Zerg had arrived. The alarms blared, red lights flashing through the Deltan ship's corridors. Roger and Xanth locked eyes, a moment of understanding passing between them. The Zerg were here. Their war, their petty rivalry. None of it mattered anymore. Survival was all that counted now. "Fair truce," Roger said, his voice hoarse, "until the Zerg are dealt with." Xanth nodded curtly. "Agreed, we fight together." They raced through the ship, Xanth barking orders to his crew. Roger's mind whirled as he tried to formulate a plan. The vortex. He needed to get back to Earth, to rally his team. The creatures were their best hope against the Zerg. The journey back was a blur, Roger's thoughts consumed by the looming threat. As he stepped out onto the war-torn landscape, he was greeted by a sight that made his heart swell with pride. His team, his vortex handlers, standing tall and ready. And at the front, Shadow, his loyal companion. Roger rallied them, his voice carrying over the assembled crowd. "The Zerg are coming," he said. "But we have a weapon they don't, the vortex. These creatures, once our enemies, are now our greatest allies. Together, we will stand against the Zerg. Together, we will prevail." A cheer went up, a roar of defiance in the face of annihilation, and then the sky darkened. The Zerg had arrived. The battle was chaos, a writhing mass of teeth and claws and acid. But the Vortex were in their element. They tore through the Zerg ranks, their predatory instincts guiding them to the aliens' weak points. Roger fought alongside Shadow, their movements perfectly synced, a dance of death amidst the carnage. But the Zerg kept coming, an endless tide of chitin and hunger. For everyone they cut down, two more took its place. Roger could see the exhaustion in his team's eyes, the desperation. They were losing. He turned to Shadow, a plan forming in his mind, a last desperate gambit. "The hive," he said. "We need to take out the Queen." Shadow growled his assent, and together they fought their way through the seething mass of Zerg. It was a gauntlet of horrors, each step a struggle, each breath a victory, but they pushed on, driven by a bond deeper than blood. At last they reached the Queen's chamber, a pulsing organic nightmare. The Queen herself was a behemoth, her bulbous form swollen with power. Roger and Shadow charged, a final defiant stand. The fight was brutal, a whirlwind of slashing claws and snapping jaws. Roger felt his strength waning, his injuries mounting. But he couldn't stop, couldn't let up. Not now. Not with so much at stake. And then, a chance. An opening. Roger lunged forward, explosives in hand, ready to end this once and for all, but the Queen was too fast, her tail whipping around to knock him back. He stumbled, the detonator slipping from his grasp. Shadow leapt, snatching the device in his jaws. Roger watched in horror as his friend, his partner, raced towards the Queen, explosives primed. He knew what Shadow intended, knew the sacrifice he was making. "Shadow, no!" he screamed, but it was too late. The explosion rocked the chamber, a blinding flash of light and heat. Roger was thrown back, his world going black. When he came to, the chamber was in ruins, the Queen a smouldering husk, and Shadow was gone. Roger barely registered Xanth pulling him from the wreckage, barely felt the pain of his wounds. All he could think of was Shadow, of the friend he had lost, the friend who had given everything to save them all. In the days that followed, as humans and Deltans alike struggled to rebuild, Roger threw himself into his work. He created a sanctuary, a place where the remaining Vortex could live out their lives in peace. It was his tribute to Shadow, to the bond they had shared. The years passed, and the story of Roger and Shadow became legend, a tale whispered around campfires and taught in schools. But for Roger, the wound never fully healed. He would carry the scars of that battle, both physical and emotional, for the rest of his days. But he took solace in knowing that Shadow's sacrifice had not been in vain, that because of him, because of all of them, humanity and Deltans had a future, a chance to build something better, something stronger. And so Roger lived on, a solitary figure in a changed world, the man who had fought monsters, who had befriended beasts, the man who carried the memory of a hero, a friend, in his heart forever. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.